All right, welcome to another deep dive. Today we're looking at this PDF you sent called High Impact Communication. And it seems like it's all about, making sure people really hear what you're saying and getting your message across quickly and effectively. So I guess, are you like trying to figure out how to give a really awesome presentation or close a big deal or maybe just win every argument at your next family dinner? Well, you've come to the right place. Let's dive in.
Yeah, this document has some really fascinating ideas about communicating in a way that works in today's world, especially because, it seems like everybody's attention span is getting shorter and shorter these days. We're going to explore some of the main ideas, like how important emotions are and even how your body language can speak volumes.
Okay, well, I'm definitely intrigued. Let's start with those basic principles. What are the foundations we need for high impact communication?
Well, the source material really emphasizes clarity and conciseness right from the beginning.
Yeah.
We're all kind of bombarded with information all the time, right? So if you're not getting straight to the point, your message is just going to get lost in all the noise.
It's so true. I mean, everybody's inbox and social media feeds are overflowing these days. It's like our brains have developed this internal spam filter. And if you don't grab someone's attention right away, your message is, doomed.
Exactly. And the document gives 3 specific things you can do to cut through all that clutter. First, making eye contact. It shows that you're engaged and present, and it signals to the other person that you value their attention and what they have to say.
Yeah, it's like that old saying, the eyes are the window to the soul. When you make eye contact with someone, you're making a real connection. You're not just talking at them.
Right. And it also helps keep the other person focused because, honestly, it's hard to zone out or check your phone when someone's looking directly at you.
Definitely keeps you accountable.
Yeah.
Okay, so what's the second suggestion?
Well, the source emphasizes that you should be encouraging the person you're talking to summarize and repeat back to you what they've heard.
Oh, so it's like building in little comprehension checks along the way to make sure they're getting it.
Exactly. It helps make sure that they're really processing the information and not just passively listening. Think about it. Have you ever kind of zoned out during a long presentation and then realized you have no idea what the speaker was talking about?
Oh, all the time, especially in those long meetings. But if they asked me to summarize the main points, I would definitely have to pay closer attention.
Exactly. It's a really subtle way to keep people engaged and make sure your message is actually sinking in. And then the final principle the source material talks about is tailoring the language you use to the listener's level of understanding.
That makes total sense. I've definitely been in conversations where the other person is using all this jargon, and I just end up feeling completely lost and confused. It's like they're speaking a different language.
Right, like trying to explain astrophysics using emojis, it's just not going to be effective.
The key is to meet your audience where they're at and use language that will resonate with their experience and knowledge.
Okay, so we've got these 3 basic principles. Eye contact, encouraging summarization, and using the right language. It all comes down to being clear and making a connection. But how do we go beyond just being understood to really craft a message that resonates with people?
That's where chapter 2 comes in. It really dives into how important it is to understand yourself and your message before you even try to communicate it with others.
So before you even open your mouth, there's some prep work to be done.
Yeah. The source breaks down communication into 3 parts: verbal, nonverbal, and paraverbal.
Okay, let's unpack those a little. Verbal is obviously the words we use. Nonverbal, I'm guessing, is like body language.
Exactly. Things like posture, facial expressions, and hand gestures. Those things speak volumes even when you aren't saying a word. And then paraverbal refers to how we say things.
So things like the tone of our voice and our pace and volume. Yes. Yeah. It's really fascinating how much we communicate just beyond the words themselves. And the source really emphasizes that when you have a really deep understanding of your message, you're much better equipped to choose the right communication style. Like, think about it. A stand-up comedian telling a joke is using a completely different communication style than a lawyer presenting a case to a jury.
Right. Because the content and the goal are totally different. One's trying to get laughs and the other one's trying to persuade and inform.
Exactly. It's about being intentional and matching your style to your message and your audience. But on the other hand, if you're not really clear on your message, that's where things can go wrong.
You mean if you don't really know what you're trying to say, it's going to come out jumbled and confusing.
Right. The source actually says that a lack of clarity from the speaker is a major source of miscommunication.
Which makes sense. If I'm trying to give someone directions to a place I've never been to, we're both going to end up lost.
Exactly. So before you even start thinking about the perfect words or practicing your body language, Take some time to understand your message and what you're hoping to achieve.
Okay, so we need to be clear, concise, and really know what we're talking about inside and out. But let's be real, sometimes we need to add a little something extra to our communication. How do we make it really impactful? How do we make people not just understand, but really feel it?
That's where we start talking about emotions, which is the focus of Chapter 3. The source suggests that using language that brings up emotions can make your communication more powerful and memorable.
So we're not just talking about appealing to the head, we're also talking about appealing to the heart.
Exactly. Think about the most memorable speeches and presentations you've heard. They probably use vivid imagery, storytelling, and emotionally charged language to connect with you on a deeper level.
Oh, absolutely. It's like when you watch a really powerful movie or listen to a song that moves you. It's not just the words, it's the emotions that come up.
Exactly. The source material actually gives some concrete examples. It suggests using descriptive words and visuals to create a picture in the listener's mind, using metaphors to create a sense of relation, and even using words that are emotionally charged to create a specific response.
So it's about using words that not only convey information, but also kind of stir up feelings. But doesn't that feel a little manipulative? Like using emotions to trick people into agreeing with you?
That's a really important point. And the source acknowledges that bringing up emotions in communication has to be done carefully and ethically. The key is to be authentic and use emotion to enhance your message, not to manipulate or deceive.
So using your powers for good, not evil.
Exactly. Emotions are a powerful tool, and like any tool, it can be used for good or bad.
Okay, so we've talked about using clear and concise language, understanding your message, and bringing in the power of emotions. But what about the things we're communicating without even saying a word?
That's where we get into body language, which is really fascinating.
Let's get into it.
Chapter 4 is all about those nonverbal cues that can either strengthen or totally undermine what you're trying to say.
So, like, even if I'm giving the most eloquent speech ever, if my body is saying that I'm bored or uninterested, it's not going to be very effective.
Exactly. Like if you say, "I'm so glad to be here," but you're yawning and not making eye contact. Your words are saying one thing, but your body is telling a completely different story.
So what are some things we should be paying attention to in terms of body language?
The source material highlights a lot of different factors, things like your posture, your handshake, your eye contact, whether you're fidgeting, how much you use your hands, and even how your voice goes up and down. For example, a firm handshake can project confidence, while constantly fidgeting can make you seem nervous or insecure.
It's crazy how much we communicate without even realizing it. But how can we tell if our body language is having the effect we want?
That's where it becomes really important to be able to read other people's body language too. If you see them leaning in, nodding along, and making eye contact, you know they're engaged. But if they're crossing their arms, looking away, or checking their phone, you might need to change your approach.
It's like having this secret communication channel that gives you feedback in real time. This is so interesting. Okay, so we've covered a lot. Clear language, understanding your message, the power of emotions, and the subtle world of body language. But let's say we've got all that down. How do we keep people interested? How do we keep their attention?
Well, that's exactly what Chapter 5 is about. It's about how to grab and keep your listeners' attention. And it actually offers some interesting techniques that might surprise you.
Okay, I'm all ears. Let's hear it.
Okay, well, one strategy is name dropping. Now, I don't mean just casually dropping the names of celebrities you know, but the idea is to sort of tap into people's natural curiosity by bringing up relevant people or organizations that your listener might find interesting.
So finding those common threads to pique their curiosity and draw them in. It's like saying, hey, we're both part of this world, and here's something cool you might not know about it.
Exactly. It creates that instant connection. Another technique is sharing surprising facts or statistics.
Oh, I love those. Our brains light up when we hear something unexpected.
Right. We're all wired to love novelty.
Yeah.
So if you can throw in some mind-blowing facts or figures, you're much more likely to grab their attention and keep it.
It's like that feeling you get when you see some random fact online and you just have to share it with everyone you know.
Exactly. That's the feeling you want to create. The source also emphasizes that you should be showing off your expertise and projecting confidence. When you know what you're talking about and you present it convincingly, people are more likely to listen and be persuaded.
Yeah, it's like that saying, fake it till you make it, but, with actual knowledge backing it up.
Yeah, you don't want to just pretend to be an expert. But even if you're not the world's leading authority on a subject, acting confident can go a long way in establishing credibility and keeping your listeners' attention.
So own your knowledge and present it like you mean it. Got it. What else can we do to keep people interested?
The source emphasizes encouraging interaction, whether that's asking questions, inviting feedback, or giving your listener an opportunity to participate.
Yeah, there's a big difference between passively listening to a lecture and actually participating in a conversation. One's a lot more engaging than the other.
Exactly. And finally, the source makes it clear that these techniques aren't one size fits all. What works for a college student might not work for a CEO. You need to be mindful of your audience and adapt your approach to fit.
So have a toolbox full of different techniques and choose the right one for the situation. Makes sense, but it sounds like a lot to think about.
It is. But the point here is to make your communication as impactful as possible. And that means being really thoughtful about how you deliver your message, not just what you say.
Okay, so we've covered a lot about how to get people's attention and make sure our message has impact. But what about when we don't have a lot of time? How do we deliver a strong message when we only have a minute or two?
That's where Chapter 6 comes in. It's all about the power of the one-minute message. It talks about why being concise is so important and gives some great tips for making the most of a limited amount of time.
Okay, I'm definitely intrigued. Tell me more.
Well, the source makes this point that in today's world, everyone's attention span is getting shorter and shorter. So if you can't get to the point quickly, you're probably going to lose your audience. Think about it like an elevator pitch. You have a really small window of time to make an impression.
It's true. If someone starts rambling on, I'm already thinking about what I have to do next.
Exactly. And the source highlights one really important strategy for making a big impact when you don't have much time: a killer opening sentence. Your first sentence is your hook. It's your chance to grab their attention and make them want to keep listening.
Yeah, it's like the headline of a news article or the first line of a novel. If it doesn't grab you right away, you're going to move on to something else.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The source says that in those first few seconds of any interaction, you need to make it crystal clear what your message is about and why the other person should care. If you can do that, you're golden.
That makes a lot of sense, but how do we do that? How do we write that killer first sentence? What are the ingredients for an attention-grabbing hook?
That's a great question, and one that we'll dig into more as we continue this deep dive into high-impact communication.
So welcome back. Before the break, we were really digging into how to create those really attention-grabbing opening sentences, especially, when you don't have a ton of time.
Right. It's all about making a big impact with those first few words.
Yeah.
So what I'm curious about is, what are some specific things we can do based on this source material to make those opening lines really memorable? Well, if you think back to what we talked about earlier, a lot of the same strategies for sparking interest apply here. Like, for instance, you could start off with a really surprising statistic or fact to grab the listener's attention right away.
Oh, I see what you mean. Like, let's say I'm giving a presentation about why it's important to invest in renewable energy. Instead of starting off with, some generic statement about climate change, I could say something like, did you know that the amount of solar energy that hits the Earth in just 1 hour could power the entire planet for a whole year?
See, exactly. That's a powerful statement, and it immediately makes people go, whoa, I had no idea. And then they want to know more.
It's almost like you're giving them a mental slap in the face, waking everyone up and making them pay attention.
That's one way to put it. The source material also talks about making sure your opening sentence is tailored to your specific audience and your purpose. Like, if you're trying to close a deal, you might want to start with a statement that emphasizes the benefits your product or service offers. But if you're giving like a motivational speech, you might open with an inspirational quote or story that sets the tone. It's all about strategy, and thinking about what's going to resonate best with the people you're talking to.
So it's not just about being like clever or shocking. It's about being intentional with those first words and using them to set the stage for a persuasive message.
Exactly. And what's really interesting is that the source material actually makes this connection between the one-minute message idea and marketing and sales.
Oh, yeah, totally. I mean, think about all those 30-second commercials you see on TV or those catchy slogans you hear on the radio. They're all about getting your attention really fast and getting the point across as quickly as possible.
Right, it's like taking your whole argument and boiling it down to its most potent form. No fluff, just impact.
Pure impact. I love that. So it sounds like this one-minute message idea isn't just for presentations. It's useful for everyday conversations, too.
Absolutely. Anytime you need to make a strong impression fast, whether you're pitching an idea to your boss, presenting a project to a client, or even just trying to make your point in a meeting, knowing how to deliver a clear, concise message can be a total game changer.
Okay, now those dreaded elevator pitches don't seem so bad anymore.
I know, right? But remember, being concise doesn't have to mean sacrificing clarity or depth. It's about finding that perfect balance where you can deliver the most important information in a way that's engaging and understandable.
It's like a super high-stakes game of verbal Tetris. You've got all these pieces, and you have to fit them together in a way that's impactful but also efficient.
That's a great analogy. And, just like in Tetris, if you don't plan out your moves, you can end up with a total mess that doesn't achieve your goals.
Okay, I'm starting to get the hang of this. But I have to ask, are there any downsides to getting really good at persuading people? Like, is there a chance these techniques could be used unethically?
That's a really good question. The source material doesn't really address that directly, but it does talk about how important ethical communication is and how using language carelessly or manipulatively can have negative consequences.
Yeah, it's kind of like what we were saying before about emotions. Just because we can bring them up doesn't mean we always should. If we're going to have these strong communication skills, we have a responsibility to use them wisely, right? It's like we've been given a superpower. We have to use it for good and not for evil.
Exactly. That's where critical thinking and self-awareness become really important.
Yeah.
As we get better at communicating, we have to think about how our words might affect others. Just because you can persuade someone to do something doesn't mean you should.
So ethical communication is more than just avoiding lies or manipulation. It's about considering the needs of the person you're talking to, being honest about your intentions, and using your skills to build understanding and trust.
Absolutely. It's about using communication to make a positive impact.
I think that's a really important point. We can have all the knowledge and skills in the world, but if we're not using them ethically, then what's the point?
I couldn't agree more. And actually, that brings up another interesting point. The source material gives us these really useful insights into how to communicate effectively, but it doesn't get too deep into the ethical side of things.
So it's kind of like an instruction manual for a powerful tool, but it doesn't come with a code of conduct.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's something we need to keep in mind as we continue to explore the world of communication. It's important to know the techniques, but understanding the ethical implications is just as crucial.
Well said. I think that's a great place to take a pause. We've covered so much, from the basics of clear communication to the power of emotions and body language to figuring out how to create a powerful one-minute message. And, we've even touched on the importance of using these skills ethically.
We have.
Yep.
And there's still so much more to discuss as we keep going with this deep dive into high-impact communication. When we come back, we'll get even further into the art of those captivating opening sentences, and we'll also talk about how you can actually apply these techniques in your own life.
And we're back for the final part of our deep dive. Right before we left off, we were talking about, creating those killer opening lines that really grab the audience's attention and make them want to hear more.
We were. And, before we kind of jump back into all the tactical stuff, I think it's worth touching again on that idea of ethical communication that we were talking about. Because it's not just about, being persuasive for the sake of being persuasive. It's really about using your communication skills to create genuine understanding and positive change.
It's about the why behind what you're communicating.
Exactly. Think about leaders or speakers that really inspire you. It's not just about using clever techniques. It's that they're speaking from a place of authenticity and purpose.
Yeah, I get what you mean. It's like the difference between someone who's trying to sell you something and someone who genuinely believes in what they're saying and wants to share that passion with you.
Exactly. When you're really clear about your values and your goals, your communication becomes more authentic and, as a result, more persuasive. It's about connecting with people on a human level, not just trying to manipulate them.
That's such a good point. Okay, so keeping those ethical considerations in mind, let's get back to those captivating opening lines. What are some specific examples of hooks that really work?
Well, one technique that could be super effective is starting off with a question that sparks the listener's curiosity.
Oh, like a little puzzle that draws them in.
Exactly. Like, let's say you're giving a presentation about the future of transportation, right? Instead of starting with this, dry overview, you could open with something like, what if I told you that in 10 years, you could travel from New York to Los Angeles in less than an hour?
Okay, now that would definitely get my attention. I'd for sure want to hear more about that.
Right. It creates this sense of intrigue and makes people want to know the answer. Another technique is to start with a bold statement or even a controversial opinion.
I like that. Shake things up right from the beginning.
Exactly. So like, let's say you're giving a talk on the importance of creativity. You could start with, the education system is killing creativity. It's a statement that's definitely going to grab people's attention and maybe even spark a debate.
It's like you're throwing a grenade into the room and seeing what happens. But you'd obviously want to be mindful of who your audience is and where you are, right? Like you don't want to offend anyone, but you do want to get them thinking.
You got it. It's about finding that balance between being provocative and being respectful.
Okay, so a thought-provoking question or a bold statement, those are great places to start. What else can we add to our list of awesome opening lines?
Well, sharing a personal story or anecdote can also be a really powerful technique. It's a way to make a connection with your audience on a more emotional level and make your message more relatable.
So, like, if I'm giving a presentation about overcoming challenges, I could start by sharing a story about a time I went through something really difficult and what I learned from the experience.
Perfect example. Personal stories can really help disarm an audience and make them more open to what you're saying because it shows you're human.
Yeah, it's like you're saying, hey, I've been there, I get it, and here's what helped me get through it.
Right. And that kind of vulnerability can create a really strong connection with the people listening.
This is so helpful. I feel like I'm finally starting to understand how to create these super engaging opening lines. But is there like a magic formula, some combination of words that's always guaranteed to work?
I wish. But, the best opening line is always going to depend on the situation. Who are you talking to? What are you trying to achieve? What's the overall message? But the good news is that if you remember these techniques, asking a thought-provoking question, making a bold statement, or sharing a personal story, you'll be in a much better place to start crafting an opening that will keep people hooked.
It's like having a toolbox full of different tools and picking the right one for the job.
Yeah, I love that. And the more you practice, the better you'll get at just instinctively knowing which tool to use and how to use it well.
This deep dive has been so great. We've learned so much about how to communicate clearly and effectively, from our body language to using emotions to how to create that 1-minute message that gets your point across quickly. And, we even talked about the importance of using those skills ethically.
I totally agree. High-impact communication isn't just about getting your point across. It's about making connections, inspiring others, and using your words to make a positive impact.
So as you go out into the world and, communicate with others, remember that your words are powerful. Use them carefully, use them ethically, and use them to create a world where communication can really be a force for good. Until next time, keep on diving deep.